Hi, I'm Rachel and I'm here to do my latest AM reading update, which coincidentally happens to be a Friday Reads this week for June 22nd, 2018. This wasn't really anything that I planned necessarily, it's just when I had things enough to report. That being said, it is late and I am tired and I'm pre-filming this, and so I figure that I will keep this relatively short, and part of the reason that I'm justifying doing that is that the two books that I read this week are both Sammy Rohr books for 2018, so I will hopefully be doing a video review for the three Sammy Rohr books that I'm planning to read for 2018, sometime in the future. But for now, I'll just give a brief little tease of things. The first one that I'll start with, I already had to return to the library. It's City on a Hilltop, which is about the Israeli settler movement, and particularly about American involvement in that, American immigrants, or Olim as they're called in Hebrew. It's by Sara, Yael, Hirschorn. I talked about it a bit in my last video because obviously it's very controversial, and so in that light I want to do it justice. So in a quick recap, I'll say that Hirschhorn had two, I think, goals in mind. She wanted to show the settlers in a more nuanced view than they're usually known as you know, rightist and extremist. She wanted to show the roots of American settlers, the first ones who came in the 60s after the 1967 war. They were idealistic, they were liberal-minded, and a lot of their emotions about claiming homes in the Jewish homeland and in historical sites of Judaism kind of were born out of the civil rights movement, and about the shifts in American politics, about social issues and minority cultures, and also a lot of it had to do with the Holocaust that American Jews and worldwide Jewry to an extent were starting to grapple with, like what it all meant, what it cost us, and what it means now to have a Jewish homeland for the first time in generations. So a lot of that idealism was really what was propelling them, but things clash. Hirschhorn was very fond of the phrase, gosh, I'm probably going to mangle it now, but it had something to do with sort of a liberal ideology clashing against settler realities sort of thing, where they were clashing with the Israeli government, which was a lot more strategic in a way. Like the Americans were coming with idealism, and the Israeli government was thinking more along the lines of buffer zones and strategy, and about territorial claims, because these lands were newly acquired due to warfare and very contested. Hirschhorn documented three communities that were started in part by American Jews, and one of them was started in the Sinai and was ultimately given back to Egypt. And so she was able to document a fair bit of the despair of losing that homeland, or that, well, I mean, that home, that town. And the two others are in the West Bank, and they're still around, although the settlers obviously feel threatened by any sort of peace process that might dismantle their homes. I don't necessarily think that she succeeded in saying that the settlers weren't right-wing, or that they weren't religious with messianic tendencies, because a lot of the people she ultimately proved in statistics and so forth were religious and were looking for a messianic age, and a lot of them have a defensive sort of nationalistic rightist streak, which I guess is just natural inclination for what their ideology is. If you want to stake a claim of that sort, especially in contested land, you naturally become more nationalistic in that way, especially when a lot of the world sort of views you as an obstacle. Another part of the book is that she did document Jewish extremists and terrorist acts against the Palestinians. You know, it's a small group of people who do that, and a lot of it was in reaction to the Palestinian intifadas and the violence that was shown to them as well. But it's a complicated group of people. I mean, a lot of their ideology of the people that she interviewed personally had, you know, they had to sort of ignore Palestinians or fit them into their narratives. Obviously, these people are not unbiased in their worldviews. But I do think she was able, in a way, to show that all of these labels of conservative and liberal don't always fit the reality of people's groups and our histories and our cultures. I mean, it's just a little too simplistic to say, you know, I'm on one side of a political spectrum or the other, given the long complications of Israeli history, or how City on a Hilltop sort of refers to the idea of them trying to be a beacon to worldwide Jewry, to say, we're here, we matter, we thrive, which is a message that is so moving to me personally and to so many other Jews, especially when you look at the history of so much anti-Jewish sentiment and anti-Semitism throughout world history, to know that there is a Jewish homeland, that there are communities of Jews out there, that you know, they're mostly suburbanite Jews actually in the West Bank. And one thing I kind of did like is that Hirschorn, through statistics, got to show that they were kind of normal to a certain degree too. I mean, that you know, they had schools and libraries and social services and all of that. So, you know, they're people, they have very controversial beliefs, but they're not one-dimensional. So hopefully I'll say all of that a bit better in my official Sammy Rohr review. Another book I hope to portray well in my Sammy Rohr review, I guess I'm feeling defensive tonight, is this one. This is If All the Seas Were Ink by Ilana Kurshan, and I have to return it to the library very soon. I really love this book. It's a memoir. It's about Kurshan reading the Daf Yomi, which is reading a page of the Talmud, which is a process that takes 7.5 years. It reminded me very much of another Sammy Rohr book that I read earlier this year called Houses of Study by Ilana Bloomberg, who Kurshan actually thanked in her acknowledgments. I mean, it could be another Bloomberg. Those are both very popular Jewish names, especially in Israel. But I have a feeling it's the same one because they have such similar backstories. They grew up in sort of modern Orthodox to conservative households. So they, and Kurshan's father was a rabbi, so she was very steeped in traditional Jewish learning, and also, like Bloomberg, she has an English major degree, and you know, this book is peppered with quotes from various literary sources, poetry and novels and so forth. And oh, and just like with the Bloomberg book, it made me feel awkward, like, I was an English major, but I can't, recall quotes at the whim, drop of a hat. And I've never been that person who, who annotates all my books. I know some people on BookTube do that, and I guess they remember quotes better that way, but I've never been the one to do that. And I guess, though, a lot of people on BookTube, maybe they don't do that, or maybe I just like BookTube because I feel like I'm one of the community, even if I don't relate to books the way that Kurshan does. I don't know. That's kind of completely beside the point. I think what Kurshan accomplished that Bloomberg really didn't was that she was grounded in reality. Like, she took what she was reading in the Talmud, and she was able to apply it to more concrete moments of her life. I can't even remember a lot of the Bloomberg book, but so much of what she was thinking about was pie-in-the-sky philosophy, and Kurshan was writing a lot more about specific events. A lot of it was very chronological because she was reading it chronologically. I mean, well, not the Daf Yomi, actually, because the thing about the Daf Yomi is that you don't just start at the beginning of the tractates of the Talmud. You start where everybody is reading. So like right now, everyone who is reading the Daf Yomi is reading the exact same page. And so you just start wherever everyone is, and then you circle for as long as it takes to read it one full time, and then you might read it again and again and again all your life. And that was a really intriguing feeling, and it made me wonder, you know, as somebody who loves to read about, I think the cover copy talked about it as like, you know, the biggest or oldest book club in the world. Like maybe I should start, and is one page of translated Talmud gonna kill me a day? I don't know. But she was relating a lot of it to the life she was living, starting as this young woman who was recently divorced and really going through a lot of depression about that, and then going through her life. She was an immigrant in Israel. She actually moved there from America with her ex-husband, and then she decided to stay, and for a while it was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and then she decided, well, I have a job and I'd better just take that next step to become a citizen, and you know, then you track her through dating and friendships, and finally meeting her second husband and having her children. And so she talked about snippets of those life events and how they related, like how the Talmud in some ways were kind of like metaphors for what she was going through. She was able to take snippets of the Talmud. This is a very short book, so she obviously doesn't cover everything that is talked about in the Babylonian Talmud. But a lot of it was very grounded in reality, and not, I think some parts that I just read about prayer got a little more esoteric, and she was talking more specifically about the text. But I guess as somebody who isn't as grounded in theology, I'm a baby learner compared to her, way baby. I really like the parts that related to her life. It's an optimistic reading of the Talmud. I mean, she acknowledges how the rabbis had rather misogynistic takes on women. I mean, if you read it as, you know, as a valid read, if you read it literally, she talked about how, you know, she sort of sidestepped a lot of that by saying, you know, obviously she could relate more to the men because she was learning the same texts that they were supposed to be learning. So that's basically where she took her inspiration from, although every now and then strong women would crop up, or issues about women that she could relate to more easily did crop up. So it's all about her perspective, she says, and maybe that's a healthier way to read things than to always be angry and offended. And if you are that way, then you shouldn't be reading it, because it's such a waste of your energy when you should be there's so much else to read that won't drain you so much. I don't know. I found it really moving. You know, I felt those inklings of wanting to be more spiritual and more religious because of the beauty and that she was able to take out of life, or how in Israel it's easier to live that life because it's kind of like the peer pressure of everyone around you being Jewish, and even the secular people celebrating Shabbat and all of that. I don't necessarily think this is a book for everybody, but if you have some knowledge of Jewish texts and rituals, or might be interested in some more, I'd suggest maybe picking this one up. On to what I'm reading next. I feel like this is somewhat similar to If All the Seas Were Ink, maybe because of the cyclical, long-winded nature of it, but this is Eternal Life by Dara Horn, and it is my Jewish book club pick for this month, so that's one reason why I want to get to it soon, and another is because, yet again, I am chained to library due dates. That's what is coming up. So let me read from the flap. Rachel is a woman with a problem. She can't die. Her recent troubles, widowhood, a failing business, an unemployed middle-aged son, are only the latest in a litany spanning dozens of countries, scores of marriages, and hundreds of children. In the 2,000 years since she made a spiritual bargain to save the life of her first son back in Roman-occupied Jerusalem, she's tried everything to free herself. And only one other person in the world understands, a man she once loved passionately, who who has been stalking her throughout the centuries, convinced they belong together forever. But as the 21st century begins and her children and grandchildren, consumed with immortality in their own ways, from the frontiers of digital currency to genetic engineering, develop new technologies that could change her fate and theirs, Rachel knows she must find a way out. Gripping, hilarious, and profoundly moving, Eternal Life celebrates the bonds between generations, the power of faith, the purpose of death, and the reasons for being alive. I've been eyeing Dara for a while. She's also a writer who is very entrenched in Jewish texts. The book that immediately comes to mind that she wrote, I believe, is about the Geniza in Egypt. The Geniza is a repository for any Jewish text that mentions God and perhaps other holy things, holy words, because we're religiously not allowed to destroy documents that mention God, so we put them in a receptacle, and the Geniza is very old, and scholars have been going there to learn about Jewish history of ancient times, really, and medieval times. So that's one book that I remember that she wrote, and this one I thought might be a little more approachable. I don't know why. I think maybe because when I first read the press release that it was getting published, it made me think of Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, and I was like, this is like the Jewish version of that, where it's, well, not several Jewish characters throughout the ages that are connected, but one Jewish character who sort of connects the ages, or maybe two Jewish characters. So I'm excited for that, and excited to meet up with my book club again, so we'll see how it goes. And this next book I'm relating to City on a Hilltop. Well, it is the third 2018 Sammy Rohr book, and the last one I have left to read, but there's also another reason for relating them. This one is called Jews on the Frontier, Religion and Mobility in 19th Century America by Shari, Rabin. So once again, it is about Jewish settlers and a frontier, except this one is in the West, in the United States, and in the 19th century instead of the 20th. So I'd be curious about if I'll pick up any parallels, because there's similar things going on, perhaps some ideology about starting a new life away from persecution. There's an indigenous population to contend with in some form, or to maybe write out of the narrative in some form. There's no Jewish history in the west of America the way there is ancient Jewish history in the West Bank, or what religious Jews would call Judea and Samaria, the names of the kingdoms. But I don't know, I feel like there might be something to be said about similarities, or maybe I'm just looking to make the video easier when I review the two books together. But anyway, I'll read from the flap. Jews on the Frontier offers a religious history that begins in an unexpected place, on the road. Shari Rabin recounts the journey of Jewish people as they left eastern cities and ventured into the American West and South during the 19th century. The book brings to life the successes and obstacles of these travels, from the unprecedented economic opportunities to the anonymity and loneliness that complicated the many legal obligations of traditional Jewish life. Rabin argues that Jewish mobility during this time was pivotal to the development of American Judaism. In the absence of key institutions like synagogues or charitable organizations, which played a central role in the lives of East Coast immigrants, ordinary Jews on the frontier created religious life from scratch, expanding and transforming Jewish thoughts and practice in the process. Jews on the Frontier vividly recounts the story of a neglected era in American Jewish history, offering a new interpretation of American religions, rooted not in congregations or denominations, but in the politics and experiences of being on the move. By focusing on everyday people, the book reveals a more complete view of how American religion has taken shape. So I can already see a certain distinction between this and City on a Hilltop, because I think just by default, Jews going to Israel would find more Jewish community, whereas Jews on the frontier in the 19th century would find less Jewish community. So that'll be interesting. So that about covers it for me now. You know, for a couple of weeks I tried to be chill about not worrying about how quickly I was reading, but now I'm feeling the pressure again, perhaps because the end of the month approacheth, and there's so much that I'd like to read this month, and maybe I'll get to it and maybe not, but here's where I am now on this Friday, the second to last Friday of the month. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well with your own reading goals, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.